Jack's RPG Podcast. I'm in Max. Pursuing the RPG hobby with reckless abandon.
Why, hello.
Hi.
And welcome to season 25, episode 18 of Happy Jack's RPG Podcast. My name is Stu.
My name is Kimmy.
I'm
Pooja.
not Stu's dogs.
Yeah.
And those of
Only
you
in
who are
spirit.
listening to the podcast and not watching live will never know what just happened.
I'm just having a really strong sense of deja vu.
Yeah. Totally professional.
In this episode of Happy Jack's RPG Podcast, Mogens from Denmark writes in about random character generation and standard arrays. Dirk writes in about campaign structure, and Ben from Texas asks, is deadliness in the game really about perception?
Ooh.
But first, if you'd like to email us, you can email us at happyjacksrpg@gmail.com. That's happyjacksrpg@gmail.com. We have a forum.
Yes.
happyjacksforum.com. That's happyjacksforum.com. And then we have the social meteors. We have the Twitters and the Facebooks and the
MeWes.
Instagrams and the MeWes. Happy Jacks RPG. All one word. Happy Jacks RPG. All one word. If you'd like to watch the show live, you can go to happyjacks.org/live and watch us and see our faces.
Yeah.
Although why anybody would really want to do that?
I don't know.
Hey.
I have a great face.
Yeah.
Kimmy has
Yeah.
a great
You got a
face.
great
It totally balances
I have
out
a-
how terrible
I
y'all
have a
are.
great face for radio.
Great face for podcasting.
Yes.
And also, if you would like to go to wherever it is you get your podcasts from and leave us a review, we would love for you to do that.
Yeah.
It increases, what do they call, what's the term for that? Discovery.
Reach.
It increases discovery.
Yes.
So go ahead and leave a review.
Yeah. A bunch of you did it after the last episode where we talked about it, and you can already see spikes in like the charts and where we are. Not that I'm the only person who's really like studying that a lot, but it helps a lot. So do the thing. It is especially important in the new year, and the new year is when a lot of people discover new podcasts because they get new devices and they want to find stuff. So having a bunch of new reviews is a very, very helpful thing for our discovery
Right.
in the new year.
And I'd like to shout out to Germany for discovering us. Thank you.
Your mic just stopped working again.
Oh.
Okay.
Hit the button again.
Okay, is it better now?
No.
No.
Keep talking.
Okay, never mind. Just don't worry
Now it's
about
fine.
it. Okay.
Now it's fine.
That's very strange.
Yeah.
It's something might be
Germany,
wrong with the wire.
thank you for discovering us. We like you.
Yes. So yeah, there's a bunch of. We've been getting notifications that we're suddenly like bumping up in the charts in a bunch of different places around the world,
Yep.
and Mexico and Germany and France and a bunch of stuff. So hello,
Hello, France.
bonjour.
My
Sorry.
countrymen.
Well, we had friends.
Yeah,
Until just
sorry.
then.
Yeah,
Until just then,
yeah,
I'm sorry.
ruined.
I'm sorry.
I'm
I'm
Nick-
from California. I speak Valley Girl. That's my other language.
I'm just hitting F. Pay my respects.
There's a city called Venables in northern France.
That's nice.
And a bunch of people there are named Venables. And that's where my name originally had an S at the end of it.
Oh.
And a lot of them look a little bit like me. I'm sorry.
Venable.
I don't mean that as an insult.
Maybe that's how
Venab.
they're discovering us. They're like Googling their own names and they're finding you.
Maybe. It could be. Bonjour.
We love you. Please don't go away.
They just went away.
Yeah.
As did all the French Canadians.
Yeah.
Random versus standard array character generation from Mogens in Denmark.
Denmark. Yeah, how long got there, Morgans?
Oh man, nobody's gonna listen to us after this episode.
No, I went to school in Denmark for a
That's
year.
right, you did.
Like, he actually knows what he's
Yeah,
saying.
I
that's
went to
true.
school. I stayed in Tostrup, Morgans. Thanks for listening, by the way. Yeah, that was my family was in Tostrup for 9 months.
Nice.
Awesome.
I since then looked at the Google Maps, and the Tostrup I was in the mid '80s is like completely changed.
Oh.
It's very different. So anyway,
Did it sink or something?
no, it's just Denmark is a very small place, and so whenever they need to, everything's constantly growing and changing, and it's changed a lot.
Yeah.
Oh.
Did you say from the mid 80s?
Don't judge me. yeah, mid '80s, like
Just like I would hope it
84,
would have.
85.
Yes, in the last 35 years, I would have hoped it would change.
Yes.
Yeah,
Interesting.
whippersnappers.
Yeah. We are.
Interesting sounds out of your mic.
All right.
All right. Greetings from cold.
It's not. It's just the language sounds.
All right.
All right, I'm done.
Oh,
not
ye
talking
jackers
anymore.
of happiness. I like that.
Oh, ye jackers of happiness! Greetings from the cold, wet, and windy country
It
of
feels
Denmark.
like it should be like a Yuletide hymn to Happy Jacks.
Oh, ye jackers of happiness.
Yeah. Something similar to that. Sorry. I know
I
you can
apologize to everyone who just had to hear me sing.
do- It's okay.
And please excuse my Danglish. That's my new favorite word. Oh, man. You want to check your Danglish there? You might want to zip that up.
The worst part is that they speak better English than we do.
Oh, yeah.
Because their English teachers were from Britain, so they actually speak
They
better.
actually learn
don't-
the grammar parts
Yes,
of it.
they do. Actually, my Danish brother, his teacher, I'm talking so he can adjust me. My Danish brother learned from an American, and my Danish sister learned from a Brit, so they were always arguing about the pronunciation of words. It's not route, it's root.
Yeah.
Oh,
True
man.
story.
Yep. All right. Greetings from the cold, wet, and windy country of Denmark. And please excuse my English. You already said that, sorry. I'm currently in the process of starting a new campaign with some homebrew rules, which are heavily based in Call of Cthulhu 7th Edition, Pulp Cthulhu. I
Cthulhu.
heavily you want to continue?
I heavily suggested to the players that they should use the quote-unquote standard array of values for the stats of the characters: strength, intelligence, appearance, blah, 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 blah. There's about 9 of them, or 8 or 9 of them, which they then could assign as they wanted, as opposed to rolling all of the stats. I see several advantages of the standard array. 1, all characters have the starting point and or opportunities, i.e. you don't get super weak or super powerful characters in the same group. While some players say they don't care about playing a character with really bad stats, in my experience, every player has that breaking point when their character failed to do something again because of a bad stat. I think that is especially important in a long campaign like the one I'm planning to run. 2, you get the stats you want for your character. Imagine the player that wanted to play the Arnold-like character and rolls poorly and gets a strength value equivalent to a newborn baby. 3, you get both high and low values in the standard array. So your characters with both strengths, so you get characters with both strengths and weaknesses, i.e. what I would call a well-rounded character.
Yes.
4, if you use the dice rolls to build, flesh out, inform your character, you can still roll/randomize the values in the standard array. So I would say that the standard array works for both backstory first, then stats, and stats first, then backstory character creation. Personally, that I've concluded that the standard array is perfect in every way, even though all generalizations are bad.
I really like this little granulation here between backstory first and then stats first.
Right.
That is an interesting
Yeah.
Yeah.
distinction.
Oh, yeah, it makes
it's a
a
really
difference.
interesting distinction.
However, one of my players strongly objected to the use of the standard array, saying that prevented him from making the character he wanted to, since I wouldn't allow dice rolls for stats. Now, did you strongly suggest or disallow? Because that's a difference. Because now I'm seeing
Well,
strengths.
like 3 lines later, he says he disallowed.
Oh,
so
okay. What are your thoughts on the standard array and or dice stats, good or bad? Am I too strict when I disallow dice rolls for stats? I'm generally very flexible when it comes to homebrew and customizing the classes and whatnot for my players, but I feel the need to be a bit strict during character creation. I'm basically just trying to avoid having to write a character out and a new character in because of poor dice rolls. However, in that process, am I ruining the fun for my players? Thanks for the fantastic show. You really are doing amazing stuff. Smiley face. Mogens in Denmark. Long-time lurker, first-time writer.
Yay!
Thank you.
Thank you for writing.
Thanks
P.S.
for lurking.
Yes.
Is this where I tell you to drink?
Yep.
Yes.
PPS. Oh, yes, it was. Sorry. Drink.
Skål!
I don't even have one. I need to get one.
Great.
I'm going to open a bottle of wine in a
Okay.
little bit.
can
No,
I just say, like, I really want to jump in here just for an answer to that end question. If you don't want to write characters out and other characters in, you shouldn't be playing an extended campaign of Cthulhu.
Point, Pooja.
Yes. Well said. I think we rolled characters randomly, but if I believe that I let you guys assign them because some of them have like roll 2d6 and add this or
Yeah, we rolled and then, like, we rolled a bank and assigned the bank.
Yeah.
If I'm
Okay.
remembering correctly.
Yeah. then we
but there's
do
like
that.
different things you roll for different stats, but we kind of grouped them if I recall correctly. So you had some flexibility.
Yeah.
And I actually really liked that. Like, it was like I got all the fun of rolling and the need to, like, focus because I got some good and some bad stats. None of us, like, out of the 4 of us had, like, crazy great stats across the board.
Right. Yeah, I don't I don't really have a preference either way. I kind of did it that way because that's the original, the old Call of Cthulhu before they had a standard array. Because that, I don't even know if that was in 6th edition. I don't remember. It might have been, but I don't really have a preference either way. I mean, if the players want to use a standard array, I guess they can. But I kind of like the idea of rolling, and then I wouldn't do it hardcore and say, you are now rolling your strength.
Right.
That is the roll you're going to keep. You are now rolling your dex. That is the roll you're going to keep. But if you can move them around, I think that's fine.
It's interesting to me too that he has a player that objected because he's not playing the character that he wanted to. It's like if you're rolling random dice, that's
Or are you going to get to play a character you want?
right.
Like,
Unless
how are
you're
you
rolling at
choosing?
home.
And or if he just wants to play a broken character. I mean, which I totally get too, which is like I want the chips to fall where they may, and I'm going to play this character. But it's interesting to me that that's a distinction the guy said. It's like you're taking away my fun by not letting me roll up a random character.
Right. I know that there are players, I know people who absolutely can't stand the Traveler character generation system.
Yeah.
They want to make the character they want to make.
Right.
Yeah.
So I understand that there are players like that, and I'm sure there are players on the other side who are like, no, I want to have the fun of making something random and then trying to figure out why this character is this way and then figure out how to play it without dying.
Yeah.
So I don't really have a preference either way, I don't think.
I think a lot of it would tie in with like what he said about whether you do backstory and then stats, or stats and then backstory.
Right.
Because I mean, if you're coming up like Cirque was saying, like with the whole character, and then you're showing up at the table, it's like, okay, well, like that, the standard array is sort of what I planned for, or whatever it is. Like again, with rolling dice, it's hard to tell unless you're doing like what we did, where we rolled and then assigned it. So we were able to come to the table with an idea and then roll and assign,
Like kind of.
It's kind of a hybrid.
To kind of match.
It's a hybrid between the standard array and rolling, where you actually roll your numbers and then you can assign them where you want to make the character that you want. And I think that that's a nice balance, because then you get some terrible stats that you have to figure out where to put, and then that'll affect your character, and maybe some better stats.
Not always though. There's always that like random time. God, who was it in a game recently that did that? And they like just gangbuster. They got everything like super high.
It's either Rob or Dave.
Probably, yeah, somebody. And then the same thing can happen the opposite way. So like there is kind of that's a hard place to be as a GM. You have to know that your characters are going to be okay with whatever they get.
Yeah.
Because
and that's like a discussion
Yeah.
that people should have. Like, it's like, okay, cool. Like, know that if we're doing the rolls, or I've had GMs step in where they're like, look, you rolled really shitty across the board.
Yeah.
And like, it really seems like this isn't going to be fun in the end. So like, let's give you I'll give you a reroll. I'll give you 2 rerolls, whatever it is, just to like make the character playable.
Yeah.
Right.
And that isn't to say like it wasn't like a boost kind of situation. It was just like, how did you manage to roll like all 20s out of 100?
Yeah.
Like statistically, if I give you 2 rerolls, you'll end up with a decently static character.
Exactly.
The thing about Call of Cthulhu, though, is your skills aren't tied to your stats at all.
No.
Right.
So you can still make a character who's good at something, but the stat that you would think would be related to that thing might be terrible.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I think maybe you're being a little bit of a hard ass.
Yeah.
Just a little bit. But
But it does drastically affect things like our luck and stuff like that.
luck, sanity,
So,
power.
yeah,
Oh, yeah.
which are all big deals in that game. So if you roll poorly on your stats, like it really does, like drastically impact how sustainable your character is through a Call of Cthulhu
sure.
game.
But
Oh,
I
yeah.
think like that's part of the reason why I feel like you do need to have some aspect of rolling in there, because Cthulhu is not D&D.
No.
Like in general, I mean, you want your character to be in for the long haul, but everything is stacked against that happening.
Yeah.
Right.
Like the entire game system is stacked against you being in for the long haul.
Oh, yeah.
So it's, I think, more fun to play with like characters that have these like interesting glaring weaknesses.
Agreed.
And because it's an investigation game rather than a fighting game, you're much, much less likely to end up with a character, even if they have poor stats, who's useless to the party.
Yeah.
Like, you're not... If all your core stats kind of suck, like, yeah, that's not great. And it definitely makes your sanity rolls harder. But then you can play with it in interesting ways, like you did. Spoilers for previous episodes of Murmurs. But like where like half the party goes indefinitely insane all at the same time.
Right.
So-
it was a big shock to us when we first played Call of Cthulhu when it first came out back in the early 80s. Because we never really figured out what the sanity thing was. Oh, yeah, sanity, whatever, it's a dry stat, okay, whatever. And then, first time we run into something, we look it up and like, oh, that's really important. I guess we should ought to start over again because now we're all insane.
That's a central conceit of the game.
Yes.
So, I don't know. Now, I think, I personally, if someone wanted to roll the stats, I would let them.
Yeah.
I didn't even give you guys an option of using the standard array.
No. Eh.
And the thing is, although the one thing I think, if you compare character creation for that to character creation for Glittering Night, which we just did a week ago, everyone for Glittering Night, because that's point buy system,
Yeah.
you can make exactly the character you want to make. Everyone came to the table with 2-3 concepts for characters. Well, I don't know if everyone did, but a lot of people had multiple concepts for characters. Jim certainly had like 4.
Yeah.
And
I think we all did. Like we all had at least like one backup in our pocket.
right. And that certainly makes it go faster, I guess. But I don't know if people really had real firm ideas of what kind of character they're going to make until they saw their stats for Call of Cthulhu. So I mean, it really also depends on the preference of the players. Like he's talking about backstory first or stats first.
Yeah.
So
At the end of the day, though, Mugens, I got to ask you this. If you had just allowed him to roll his character, would it have broken the game? I mean, maybe everybody else can use the standard array, and if he wanted to roll, let him roll. I mean, he still would have come up with a character with stats.
and to be like kind of dovetailing on what you said, characters with bad stats are kind of going to write themselves out of the game anyway. You don't really have to do a lot of work as a GM to figure out how they're going to go away.
True.
They'll go away.
I mean, Stu's kind of his new rule zero is a player wants to do something, and he thinks about it very quickly, like, okay, what will affect if I just let that happen? No, nothing. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. If you want to.
Yeah.
All right.
But, yeah. I mean, it is your game, though. So
Yeah.
if you and make sure your other players are okay with that too.
Yeah.
Like would be my one kind of caveat to that. If like they're all like, well, that's I don't know. It's as somebody who runs a classroom, sometimes having everybody do the same thing is the most fair thing you can do.
Right.
But yeah,
It
most
is
people
true.
probably won't care. I
Right.
wouldn't care. Like if someone was like, I have to use a standard array. Cool, dude. That's great. Cool.
Yeah. Do you do
Yeah,
you.
you do you.
Especially because, like, I'm assuming you're in your gaming group, you're all kind of friendly at least, if
Yeah.
not friends.
Right.
I hope so.
All right.
If not, you should write us that email.
Yeah.
Yeah. We love those. So thank you, Mogens from Denmark, for the email.
Yes.
And welcome, long-time lurker, first-time
Yes.
writer.
Yeah,
Thank you for
appreciate that.
lurking, and thank you for listening, and thank you now for writing in.
Lengthy introduction and short question on campaign structure from Dirk. I can
my gosh.
help read some of this because it's almost
I'll
3
start.
pages.
Should we each take a paragraph?
Oh, I'll start. It's fine. You guys can
And
stop
then
me
we'll
when you
just
start.
rotate through?
I mean,
Dear
each take a
Happy
page.
Jackers, I never thought it would happen to me, but it totally did.
Oh God.
Today, October 23rd, 2019, is a day I shall never forget. This day, this momentous day, is the day that I ran out of backlog. It is the day I reached the end of the tunnel and realized the light is just that, a light. It is the day that driving home from work, I finally finished playing the last episode of Happy Jack's RPG ever recorded. Until Friday, that is. It has been a journey, and what a journey it has been. I've listened to tales of horror, many and highly entertaining, tales of glory and successes, fewer but enlightening in their own way, all the while reflecting on my own experiences and recognizing many of the faults and even a few of my successes.
Excellent.
All in all, I feel your podcast should help me be a better GM. Whether it does or not, well, that is entirely on me.
Welcome.
About that, me. Perhaps I should briefly introduce myself and establish my geek credits, of course. I'm Dirk, he, him. And to utterly confuse everyone, I go by Dirk on the forum as well as on Discord.
Ah, that's
In case of doubt on how to pronounce it, it is like the Scottish dagger, only with an E. If all else fails, the Scottish dagger will do.
So
Only
it's
with an
Derek.
E. Derek?
It's Derek.
Dirk.
Okay.
Derek.
D-I-R-K, right?
But he spells it D-E-R-K, so he
But
says
it's
it's
pronounced.
like Dirk, but with an
Derek.
E.
It's just like the
Does it mean
Scottish-
it's only spelled with an E, but it's still pronounced like the Scottish dagger? Or does that mean that it's spelled like the Scottish dagger,
I'm
except you put
moving
an E
on.
rather than an I?
Anything but jerk is fine and dandy with me.
You now have to write another email to clarify
Although
how to
Dirk's not
pronounce your
perfect.
name.
Look, if it rhymes with jerk, then it's got to be Dirk because he says right there. Okay, anyway, I'm 47. I'm a 47-year-old gamer from the Netherlands. Another sort of Scandinavian. We like this. First indulged in Dungeons and Dragons Redbox in 1985.
Nice.
Advanced onward to a. You're getting hipster all over us. 1985 advanced onward to AD&D.
We love you
then
anyway, Dirk.
then
Yes. Yes.
Derek.
Dirk.
and the rest of France is now shut up. And then to Shadowrun and GURPS
Yeah!
in the early 90s. As an addict of many geek hobbies, miniature wargaming, and a little bit of LARP, historical cavalry
Nice.
reenactment, medieval jousting, computer geekery,
Historical
etc.
cavalry reenactment. You guys have horses? Or do you use like a stick with a horse head on it?
It's like playing Quidditch.
No.
My interest in RPGs waned.
He says medieval jousting, so I'm guessing like actual horses.
Oh, okay. All right.
Or
Excellent.
he has somebody running next to him
With coconuts.
coconuts.
How did you get the coconuts?
A Monty Python LARP.
Did he?
That would be so much fun.
Oh,
Oh, man.
make that happen.
We're
An
never
African
getting
or
through this
European
email.
swallow?
But we're really entertained, so thank you.
My interest in RPGs waned in the mid 90s. After an intermission
Mine
that
too.
I survived through not dying, there's a
Always
story
a
there
plus.
somewhere. I stumbled back across RPGs around 2010 or so. I joined.
Warhammer Fantasy
Oh,
Roleplay.
thank you. I was going to say, what the fuck, RP?
What the fuck?
Campaign and discovered all the amazing things indie RPGs have added to the hobby since.
Yay!
With Roll20 as a platform for gaming with geeks around the world, I have since tasted the likes of Apocalypse World, Dungeon World, yes, even been singed by the hot circle of Burning Wheel. Not as bad an experience as Stu thinks.
Okay.
I've had my wallet plundered by Kickstarters, including quite recently that of Demigods.
Yeah.
I'm invested in John Harper's writings, but all those pale compared to the damage wrought to my bank account by FFG with Legend of the Five Rings and Star Wars. Yes, much to be said on chicken entrails and like, but not in this email that is getting far too long already.
But we are not halfway done yet.
A little over a year ago, I stumbled across your Inukai L5R actual play, tripped, and got hooked on a steady diet of Happy Jacks RP since.
Yeah.
I must compliment Happy
First
Jacks
one's always
RP as a true gem of a podcast with interesting discussions, an amazing cast of hosts. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Amazing cast of hosts, and a very healthy attitude towards our collective hobby. As a white cis male player, I truly appreciate that diversity of your hosts and can only imagine what a joy it must be to the less neckbeardy portion. And there's a little star.
There are people who are neckbeards who are not cavemen.
Of the
Let me
RPG
just say,
community.
It's just they don't know to shave this part. That's all that means.
So much that I recently found myself dismissing actual plays by yet another bunch of white guys as probably narrow and not very interesting. Beard check, neckbeard. No.
Oh, the asterisk was about the beard.
Yeah,
Right, I get it.
checking the
Yes.
checking the neck.
Anyway, enough fawning over your amazing podcast. I do have a thought I want to put forward for your discussion. In my efforts to improve my game mastership, I keep coming across experts like the How to Be a Great GM YouTube channel with advice on pacing the game. Even after ignoring his preachiness, a hard task indeed, I struggle with making sense of his advice. Perhaps I'm an utterly failed GM, but I cannot wrap my head around how I can, on the one hand, yes and my players, and be a fan of their characters, and at the same time, try to tell my story. In fact,
quotes.
I strongly believe that my story is a fallacy. I can hear you yell, "Go write a novel!" already. In short,
We need shirts that say that.
what they are trying to sell is that the optimal is to have three key elements to a campaign: a clearly defined introduction, a middle consisting preferably of two parts, a great conclusion.
Where did they get the two part? What are the two parts?
That's
think
what
this-
the dude said.
Yeah, I think
that's
this
what
is
the YouTube.
It's sort of
That's
your
the YouTube.
standard. It's your standard story arc kind of
Yeah.
model.
I mean, normally isn't it 5 acts?
Yes.
in missing an act.
But to be broken down into their own mini-stories with an introduction, middle, conclusion each. I'm lost already because trying to write a conclusion at the start of a campaign strikes me as an utter waste of time. Trying to hang on to the above seems to be a surefire way to railroad the heck out of the campaign, either by denying options, no, that door cannot be opened, or by false option, yes, you can go through that door 1 second while I teleport my villain to the passages behind the door. I am honestly pleased if I can predict where we will be halfway into the next session. I could be even more chuffed if the players surprise me and we end up somewhere completely unexpected. My belief as a GM that I should be able to always answer the question, which players' beliefs, instincts, traits, am I challenging here, then throwing in a twist or major encounter, or at least have a very good reason why it is there when it is not tied to an aspect of the characters. Overall, the spotlight should go to the characters, not on the brilliant story that I am desperately trying to craft, while allowing some space for those pesky, willful player characters. That said, I've also encountered the problem with games floundering, as there seems to be no direction with players and GMs struggling alike to find a direction.
Yes.
Yes. So, anyways, to help structure the dynamic nature of a game without interfering with player no, we will not use that term anymore. Allow me to rephrase it.
You can use agency.
Without allowance, the player's meaningful choices or
Without
meaningful
allowing.
vote to our friends in the UK. Ooh. What can the GM do to prevent games moving forward and having some tension arc throughout the campaign? So
Why-
do you great
wait,
jackers have any insightful advice to add here? I'm not sure about that sentence myself.
I think it's supposed to do to make sure the games are moving forward and having some
can the GM
having
do
some
that?
tension arc throughout the campaign rather than to prevent that.
Yeah,
happening.
Yes.
Okay. My approach. Okay, so what do the great jackers have any insight to advice to add here? Do you want to add anything here?
Well, it's,
Carry on?
he talks about his approach real quick.
Okay,
So maybe
all right.
Yeah.
My approach to the moment is I'll come in again. My approach at the moment is
Line.
to try and create an unholy mix of Apocalypse World style fronts and clocks, Burning Wheel style beliefs, instincts, and traits, bits. A strong dose of yes and, or be a fan of your characters, and look through the crosshairs, always consider killing off NPC, overthrowing status quo, etc. Am I committing sacrilege when applying all of the above to a game of The Legend of the Five Rings, or am I perhaps on a path towards getting the art of GMing? Am I truly missing out on something by focusing on the above rather than on the overarching structure? I look forward to your thoughts and ridicule.
Oh.
Best geek regards, Dirk. P.S. I love Casilda's song. Casilda's song? Sorry. It's really
Yay.
atmospheric, even when Stu seems to think it isn't. It is even better played on the car stereo on loud.
Yeah, I did that after.
PPS, the new closing song anthem. I'm sorry, but it really doesn't work for me.
Yeah,
I wish I
tried.
could say why. All I can say, I do enjoy listening to it.
I
So
do not enjoy listening
It
to
does
it.
not. I mean,
so sorry to see the old one go due to copyright issues. PPP, Zach! I just realized I may have forced you to read through all of that drivel without going drink. So please drink.
Drink.
Prost.
Thank you for writing in a very good email.
So what was this question here? It's very
So-
long.
oh god,
It was so long ago.
It
Like-
was.
Like kind of like GMing advice. Like how do you find a balance where you're not like writing your novel and forcing the players through your chapters of your novel, but also not being so kind of loosey-goosey with it that you end up kind of floundering. And not knowing, all right, well, what's our motivation? We don't really have a point right now. So like where do you find that happy middle just right place?
I'm probably not the best person to answer this because I've run a lot of one-shots in the last, I don't know, that's really all I've done, and I structure the hell out of them
Yeah.
Right.
in order to keep the pacing down and everything, and I literally have a beginning, middle, and end. But they're kind of roughly framed up, they're scenes, and so I'll hang everything off of a scene. So it's not necessarily the middle of my whole campaign, but there's a scene that takes place in a castle. You just have to get into the castle and scene, and then the players get to go into this thing that I've already set up. By pacing out a long campaign, I don't think is possible. What you have to do is you have sort of your introduction, you meet in a tavern, and then you have a lot of middle in between there, that a lot of stuff happens. And then when everybody starts to get tired, and Stu's done this before too, it's like, we're going to start wrapping it up. And then you can start your conclusion. But for the most part, there is no middle. The middle is where everything else happens, and you just sort of adapt.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I can say. But I love to over-prep. I'm a world creator. I'll spend hours and hours and hours like mapping out a castle. And then if they don't go, they're like, we'll find another use for it.
I have a long explanation. Want to go first?
Were you going to say something?
No.
Okay. I was going to say, okay, so we've talked, actually, I don't know if it's on the podcast or just in Stu's backyard. We've talked about different kinds of writers and different types of authors. So there's George R.R. Martin, which is, by all accounts and by people talking about his writing style, he writes as he goes. He makes it the story as he goes based on what he thinks the characters would do in that situation. He's not the person who plans it all out first and then writes it according to his plan. Then, I can't give an example, I forget who we talked about. Then there are those authors who go through and they plan everything and they write it all out and then they actually...
Outline everything.
Yeah, outline everything, and then they compose the novel. I try, as frustrating it is being a fan of an author who writes it as they go because it takes so long, I try and be a GM like that, where I kind of go through and I don't plan the full story, but I plan a bunch of NPCs and their motivations. Like, I'll plan the villain and then, like, what their motivation is, which gives me structure to work in as I'm running the campaign. So then it's like, I'm not planning, oh, the villain's going to do this, but I'm like, hey, the villain is interested in hurting the party because they have this thing. So then, like, whenever that thing comes up, then the villain will probably act with them. So it's a way of having a structure and a plan that isn't an outline and a novel that they're forced to go through. So, like, things will trigger, action. I'll be like, oh, I want to make sure there's a combat, today. So I'll, like, think, and as the players start doing whatever they're doing, then, oh, hey, that would definitely trigger this person to do this, and that would cause a combat or something like that. So I don't plan every place they go, but I plan enough of the world around them that I know how the world would react to their actions, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I think that, there's a really big difference between planning out everything you want your characters to do and, like, only giving them one option from place to place to go to, or what is actually there for them to do, and having a kind of general idea of your end game as a GM. Where you say, like, okay, at the end of this, like, I know who my villain is. I know who I want them to confront. And that this is going to be, like, not mapping out how they do it or anything, but just saying, like, these are the goals that your party is working towards that may still be hidden to the party, but are known to you as a GM, so you can structure stuff kind of around that.
Yeah.
And that prevents a lot of this floundering, because if you see your characters are kind of at this stalemate moment, you can introduce, say, like, an NPC who has a motivation that gives them an extra clue, or gives them, even if it has nothing to do with the overarching plot, if you have a kind of backlog of interesting NPCs in your pocket that you can pull out when they're stuck, or when they're, like, literally looking around the table going, like, well, what the hell do we do now?
Yeah.
That's a great, like, it's just like a catalyst thing.
The first thing I want to say is I don't think either approach is an invalid approach to role-playing games. There are GMs and players who like a structured game, who want a game that does have that planned out, beginning, middle, and end.
They want to know they get the right answer.
And that's fine.
Yeah.
However, I am a strong believer that you're going to get a better story if the players are contributing to the story in a real meaningful way. I've run... I'm trying to think what game it was. Vampire. The Mode of Sin game. I had a sort of end game in mind for that. Spoilers. There was a Toreador NPC named Sebastian who had a brother, I think, who was Anthony, who was a Nosferatu. They had come up with this plan. They were going to find an antediluvian and basically become vampire gods. That was a long-term plan, and I came up with that before we even made characters. And that game actually had probably more floundering around in it than any game I've run.
Yeah, go start. Woohoo! We did it.
And I don't know, and I don't think that was because of the story I came up with. I think it was because of the structure of the fact that the players had their own domain that was sort of separate from the prince.
Yeah.
And and basically I was throwing problems at them. Some of them could be harnessed to help in this process. Some of them might
There's
not.
a lot of problems. There's also learning the game, also just leveling up so we could take on things. I
Right.
mean, at some point we started Diablo-izing everything because that's the only way to get power in order to take on an antediluvian.
Right. So that campaign, I definitely had a strong idea of where it was going to end. I think it went a few sessions after that because the whole Miroslav thing happened when he took over.
We definitely added a lot to what you had planned.
Yes.
As we went, because new things were introduced.
Then you compare that to the Exodus campaign, where I literally had no idea how the game was going to end. I didn't even know what the subject matter of the game was going to be.
Yeah.
I spent the first 4 or 5 sessions, I think. I just wanted to kind of establish the world and let the players kind of get a feel for what the world was like. So they kind of traveled around and they did some stuff, and I threw little bits and pieces of various different things that could become plot hooks. Because, like I said, I'm writing this now for a book, and I'm at 139 pages now, and almost all of that, I would say 90% of it, I wrote before the campaign began. I'm just transferring it out of my OneNote into.
So would you say that you gave us a sandbox to
I
play in?
gave you a sandbox to play in.
And then he crowdsourced us to come up with stuff for him.
Wait, isn't it Fish Tank now? I'm
It's
sorry.
Fish Tank.
I'm
It's
Fish Tank now.
There's so many
It's
terms.
Catbox, actually.
Yeah.
Oh, that's just
Cat
hippie
box?
then.
It's Catbox.
Yeah.
It's not.
So
No.
there's Almond Roca.
No.
So anyway,
Can
But-
never eat almond roca again. Thanks, dude.
but when we got to a certain point, I introduced an element to it that the players really grabbed onto, which was the
Nanotech.
nanotechnology.
Quantum bots.
Right, and you didn't even know that yet because
True.
and they grabbed onto that, and I'm like, okay, that's going to be the plot. Whatever, how much of that prep I've done some. I'm going to do some more, and then I was able to kind of figure it out. But I didn't know where the end point was going to be until that point.
Yeah.
And that you guys determined. And at that point, I'm like, okay, how could this possibly end? Well, it's probably going to end with a big battle because there's going to be this dude, and they're going to have to kill him. And
Stork's gonna one-shot him while he goes.
Right.
"Exterminate."
Not-
Oh, sorry. Like total spoilers.
The only time I've ever succeeded at one shot.
it was my one good roll.
It was so good.
But I think that was probably a more satisfying ending for the campaign than I think that the
L5R.
the vampire one.
Although the Nazi submarines was a really nice touch.
But that had nothing to do with game
I-
prep.
well,
that was
that's not
all
the
on the
GM.
players.
Yeah.
It was awesome.
I did actually make them. They were all Gould Nazis.
Right.
Samantha's character bought a surplus U-boat.
Yeah.
But then her sire gifted her like a crew.
A crew
that she
made up of Gould Nazis
Yeah.
who had actually been on a U-boat.
Yeah.
Right. And she's like, we're going to have to re-educate you guys. So
Well, their whole appearance was good. It's like they dumped out on the beach and they're all like goose stepping around and signaling everything that moves. And it was just
Well, they were also really old.
it was a
They were
ridiculous
like these-
scene.
Yeah. But
Oh, it was
yeah.
so fun.
But I think the Traveler ending was more satisfying as a game, and I did not even know where there was going to be any sort of. I had no idea where that campaign was going to go.
That's something
You
that
see
I've
what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's something I've discovered at GMing too. Like when I first started GMing, I did that where I had like my planned ending, and it was great. Like people got there, and there's like, in like a video game, you kind of know what's going to happen. You're going to get there eventually, and then you fight the guy. So that's always fun. But I've found, and lately I think just like our trend recently as a group of Happy Jacks is to be more flexible with that. And I found you do get much more poignant, much more emotional, climaxes to your story when it's something that you've kind of pulled and evolved from what the characters are themselves and what they've created.
Right.
So even if you're like, okay, there will be a bad guy and there'll be a big fight at the end, because like I'm running superhero right now. Like,
That's almost every game.
yeah, exactly. So you kind of like have it planned out, but maybe you don't exactly plan exactly who it is. Maybe you know what their attack will be, but maybe you wait and you're like, oh, maybe it's this person, and then you wait until, that's just one of the reasons I really love doing Session Zero, where you do a lot of world creation together, because you get a bunch of things you can use. It's
Yeah,
really
especially
helpful.
with like the game you're running right now with Eidolon, like being able to pull in stuff like the fact that they're doing community service.
Yes.
And it's like suddenly that became a major element that y'all dealt with in session 3. There, it's like, oh, hey, and that's something they came up with when they did Decima, when they were doing session 0. And there was one other thing, like, I just can't think of it right now.
Yeah. But those are great things you can pull out, like, when you get into those moments, because I had hit one of those moments where, like, oh, we just done a bunch of interesting stuff, and then it sort of felt like, oh, I'm feeling, like, floundering. Everyone's having, like, they're all teenagers because it's masks. It's like, oh, everyone's hanging out on Saturday. Feels like nothing's happening. Oh, you have to do community service because this is what we came up with in session 0. Okay, so now you're doing community service for, you know, this top secret organization because you're superheroes who really messed up in one of your missions. So it like led to this whole other thing. So I had a whole, now it's 2 sessions of material that came from that I hadn't necessarily planned. I knew it would be somewhere in the campaign and I had it kind of planted in my head, but I just didn't know when it would land. And it's like, oh, we need to like poke the barrel at it. We need to make them do something. Oh, community service time, guys. You just get called. Here's the shuttle. It's showing up.
Oh, and Jack Johnson.
Yeah.
The best NPC
ever.
There's pluses and minuses to over prepping. I really like having those NPCs or making a big bad, and so your story's chugging along, but you know, player agency is going to be what it does, and so maybe instead of fighting the big bad, they end up joining him.
Yeah.
Right. So now you end up having to like drop back and punt, and that's fun for you as a GM. You're like, but you can't be too married to your story. The point is that the yes and is to not block that. To say no, you're supposed to fight the big bad because in your head you've created this whole battle sequence. You thought you've already mapped out how it was going to go, just sort of maybe in your head. And so when they say, yeah, we're going to join him instead, we're going to join Vader and not kill him, you're like, don't panic. That's the story they want.
Yeah.
You have to yes and that and roll with it. And it's fine. Your big bad's still there. It's just the outcome is not what you
Take 5
had
minutes,
set up.
go to the restroom.
Yeah,
Right.
That's our trick. Yeah.
Something
Or
will come
if
to you.
they, like, you know, they choose the dark side, okay, great. That's a great cliffhanger.
Yeah.
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 Like, next time on.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, that's the thing is don't get too married to what, I think that's a major thing that you said, was don't get too married to the idea of what you want people to do. You have, like, okay, know, like, your basic kind of goalposts, but be flexible with how they get there. It's the whole thing that we talk about all the time, that people have, like, you have multiple ways, multiple solutions to a problem.
Yeah.
So they have all kinds of avenues to get to those, to get to the end of that journey. And if they end up going around, like, creating a whole woven tapestry Wheel of Time style, and, you know, you die and Brandon Sanderson has to come in and finish your game for you.
You don't just die in the middle of your story. Not to Psych 101 it too much, but there's much relationship advice hinges on the fact that people write scripts. You know, it's like, oh, I'm going to say this and they're going to do that, or they didn't do that, now I'm upset. And that's kind of what this is, in a way, which is you've written a script in your head about how this game is going to fall into place, and when it doesn't, you panic and you freak out. You have to be much more flexible in your GMing style to just roll with whatever your players are going to throw you. And Stu is really good at it, and he's very comfortable. And sometimes it takes putting your ego aside, because you can be very proud of what you've created, and suddenly you feel like the players are stepping on your toes by taking all this wonderful stuff that you've created and walking on it. You have to realize that it is a collaborative effort. They're not there to
Or avoiding it.
Or avoiding it. Or just completely avoiding it altogether, yeah.
Or
You know what
saying,
it's
this
like?
seems like death.
And it does take some courage to say, okay, this is the story that you guys are creating. I'm going to go with that.
Yeah. It's like babysitting very young children. And I don't mean that in like a way to put down the players, but like, I don't know how many of you have ever babysat very young children, but you show up and you have your kit of stuff. You have some coloring books, you've got like a game to play, you're like, okay, I've got some videos, you have no idea what order things are going to be in.
What generation are you in? Where's the iPad?
I was
When I was
like,
when I was babysitting, I could not afford to bring an iPad
Okay,
for my
right.
kids, the kids I was babysitting. I'm sorry, if they had iPads, great.
Right.
But
Coloring books they've got adult coloring books now. It's a thing.
I know.
Yeah.
People love coloring books.
But anyway, you have all your little like things you have to fill their time and to keep them entertained until. But you know, okay, we have to have dinner, we have to have bedtime. There's things you have to hit in there, and you can kind of be flexible with that depending on the parents. But you just have to like be ready with like different things at different times, and you kind of plan ahead of time. And then sometimes you have to improv, like, oh, you guys are done with the coloring books. Let's play hide and seek. I don't need any supplies for that. Cool. So anyway, that's what it is. It's like thinking on your feet when you don't know exactly what will be the best choice, but trying to hit certain marks. I don't know. I think I went way down the path with that. I'm sorry.
We all got
We
lost.
were all in on that.
Yeah, I was in
I
on
was
coloring
there.
books and stuff.
Yeah. I was ready for that, and it made no sense. I'm sorry.
I
Thank
hope-
you, Dirk. That
I
was a
hope
good.
we answered your question.
Yeah. I feel
I
like it was a.
think we did.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting too because it's like you ask different GMs this question, and with every GM you'll get a different answer.
Well,
And
okay.
a lot of it depends on your group too.
It
Like
does.
we have specifically been talking about story-driven games because Happy Jacks, like as a group, that's what we play. But sometimes you have a group that like what they really want is a nice structured dungeon crawl, and
Yes.
there is absolutely nothing wrong with that if that's what you all showed up with the expectation of, and that's what's going to make you all have a bunch of fun for however many sessions that takes. And those tend to be really structured, and it's like a make a deal, and you pick what's behind door number 2. Almost said door number B. But and those are all fun in their own way. So like it's not necessarily that there's anything wrong with like letting your players lead, or that there's anything wrong with running like a more structured story. But it's just that agreement that you have at the table. Like you go in and you communicate like adults do. So that y'all
Yeah,
all
presuming
have
a
a
lot.
good time together with like the kind of play and like what expectations are.
At the risk of muddying the waters any further, and maybe leapfrogging off what you just said, and maybe this will make the last analogy, which is it's the difference between improv and a scripted play. They're both very entertaining, but they're both radically different. And improv takes a lot more courage, and it can be very scary as a performer because you just don't know if you're funny. You don't know what's coming next. You're out there. You know, everything's out there, and you could fail at any moment. And the scripted play still has a lot of tension in the moment. It's like, am I selling this point well? Am I doing this right? Am I hitting the timing right? Am I making my blocking? All of the technical stuff, and also and then being able to emote the story. They're both very entertaining to watch. One is scarier to perform than the other, I think. Well, they're both scary in different ways.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just that
Does
they're
that
different
help?
flavors.
Yeah.
They're different flavors.
I don't know if it. I don't
If you have bad memory, one's probably a lot scarier.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Everyone's looking at me. I think I have a line here. I have no idea what it is.
Line.
Am I naked? The whole school here?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Dirk or Derek.
Dear.
We
Yeah.
appreciate you, and we appreciate your. it
We
was a good
do.
email. Good
We really
conversation.
do.
No, it's a Scottish Derek. It's Derek.
Derek. All right, Derek.
Laddie. Deadliness in D&D from Ben in Texas.
I guess
Pulling
I'm
the R
doing this
forever on your name. I'm sorry, Derek.
This is probably the first
There.
I've ever heard this greeting.
And thank you for your compliment about Casilda's song. And also, I kind of agree with you about the anthem. I'm going to try to write another one at some point.
What'll happen
I
eventually?
would really like to
Music.
use the Soviet national anthem again. Just
We just have to find a different recording of it that we can get permission.
one
or-
that's public domain. I can't find one. I can find MIDI files.
If anybody has an orchestra that are friends of theirs,
Any orchestra leaders out there who would be willing
Yeah.
to record a nice
Soviet
recording, a
national
good
anthem.
professional recording of your
course.
orchestra playing
Oh,
the
no.
Soviet national
It
anthem.
would be so great to have like a grade school version of it with just
yeah.
out-of-tune instruments.
Oh
like,
my god, that'd be even
Oh,
better
God.
than a good version
It's
of
That'd
it.
just be the best.
I just want one that's all recorders and violins.
Well, the instruments are almost
Almost
get the
in
right
tune.
notes. Just
Almost
almost,
in
you know. Oh, it'd be genius.
It would be so good.
man.
Okay. Deadliness in D&D from Ben from Texas. Greetings, douche canoes.
That's my new favorite. Especially the way you said it, douche canoes.
I enjoyed your recent discussion about how to make D&D deadly with scare quotes. Of course, D&D has a specific mechanic with challenge ratings that lets the DM calculate how deadly the encounter will be. There's even a category named Deadly. If you're like me, though, you can only stand 1 or 2 combats per session, and the Deadly rating in the damage assumes you're going to wear...
DMG,
I'm
Dungeon
sorry.
Master Guide.
Oh, yes, sorry. You can tell what I play with. And the Deadly rating in the DMG assumes you're going to wear the PCs down with 3 or 4 medium encounters.
Oh my god, 5 combats in session. Jesus.
After running a campaign for a couple of years, it became my policy to make every encounter deadly.
I did the same thing.
Otherwise,
Did.
Otherwise, the combats were pretty boring. More interesting, though, was a conversation I had with one of my players. I asked them how tough they thought the encounters were. I was surprised when they told me that they were genuinely concerned that the party wouldn't make it out alive. That sounds like yes, check. Now, being the DM, I knew exactly how likely it was that the monsters would win. Not very likely. Despite the encounter being rated as deadly per the DMG, the PCs had everything well in hand. I also knew they had like a dozen trump cards that they could play if things weren't pear-shaped. But the players still felt like the encounter was threatening. Winning? Yes. Yes. So I'm wondering if making your game more deadly is actually about making it feel more deadly rather than ensuing that PC death is mechanically probable or possible. What sorts of things make encounters seem dangerous? Maybe high stakes are more important than danger. What are your thoughts? Your inebriated friend, Ben from Texas.
Ooh, that's a good question.
I don't know.
If you're
I
playing
ran into this
D&D,
exact
yeah.
same thing when I ran the 4E game and the 5E game.
Yeah.
Every combat we had, I'm like, they're all. And I was using. I kind of threw the CR thing out of the window. I'm going to pile on a bunch of monsters and make up monsters and shit. And I tried to make them as deadly as I possibly could. I felt that almost every combat in both of those campaigns were fucking cakewalks, except one.
Yeah.
Except for one super overpowered fight that lasted like 5 hours at table time.
Well, there was the one, too, that you did kill Casey's character when he came in that one time, because we realized that when the zombie exploded, he set off the other exploding zombies, and Casey got caught by, like,
that's right.
5 of them.
That's
Yeah.
right.
But that's only because we looked at it, and you looked at it and went, oh, they've got a blast radius. Oh, they're standing close. It's not like you designed it. It was one
I
of these,
didn't.
oops.
Yeah, it was some kind of skeleton that when they die, they're like a flame skeleton of some kind.
Yeah.
When they die, they explode and do damage around to everything around them, and they were all clustered around Casey's character. So he got hit by like 4 of them, like
All at the same time, yeah.
yeah.
I feel like
I
there's
forgot all
like
about
reminds me of like an XCOM or something. There's like an alien that does that.
Oh, really? It was awesome because it set off a chain reaction, which I totally had not intended.
Yeah.
But I mean, what was like the it's been years now, but the 5th edition D&D game, did you guys ever feel like you were actually in danger?
I feel like we felt... yeah, I feel like we did sometimes. At least to losing somebody. Like, I never felt like it was going to be a TPK, but there was a couple times where we got close to losing, like, one person. And that kind of ratcheted up kind of the tension with that. But yeah, most of the time, it's hard in D&D.
Right.
You know, you've got... Especially because I tend to play, like tank types, like it's just so fucking tough.
And you got a lot of stuff, especially you get higher levels. There's tons of stuff that you can do.
Yeah.
Now, I can see players can start getting worried when they start running out of those whole cards.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the thing is like, oh, well, I'm starting to run low on my spell slots for the day, or like, I only had so many arrows if you're playing with like those kinds of rules.
Yeah.
And a ranger.
Right.
No one plays
And
rangers.
I love Rangers. I
know,
play
you do.
Rangers all the time. I made so many Aragorns, it's ridiculous.
Well, and that's what he's saying. He's like, most of the deadly encounters are assuming you've had some medium encounters and used up a lot of that stuff.
Yeah,
Yes.
before you did get worried if you had used up all your dailies, and now all of a sudden you were in another encounter. You're like,
Yeah.
Can we rest? Can we rest ahead of time?
Right.
We're going to take a nap and then go into the dungeon,
Yeah,
please?
we did.
Yeah,
we
I
did.
mean,
And we did it like that's how I played
cheesy.
D&D.
I know.
3.5 is like, you are at the last safe space before you enter the underground.
Yes.
Long rest.
Big
Right.
neon signs.
But I feel like high stakes in a lot of cases. Like if you're playing D&D, the story stakes are going to be a lot more important
yeah.
or a lot more impactful than encounter stakes being deadly or not as deadly. If you're not specifically tailoring each encounter and like homebrewing a bunch of monsters to fit your party super well.
The only way to make things seem interesting to me is by controlling the environment that they're in. It's like slowing your fighters down in water or small corridors or darkness or negating, the magical powers and such. So, because what makes an encounter deadly is, like saying GURPS or even Traveler, where you can get one-shotted. And it suddenly changes the players' perceptions and their tactics. Instead of the barbarian just raging out and running in, people stop and they make maps and they say, all right, you go around here and you go over here and we're going to hide behind those barrels and we're going to see if we can drop the stalactite on them, okay? That's a whole different way of playing than I rage out and run in. I'm going to use my daily, I'm going to do this. You play differently when you know that you might actually die. You play smarter and you plan rather than just
I think
barreling
there's a
in.
lot of people that plan D&D, which is why I think a lot of combats end up being cakewalks, and maybe they wouldn't be otherwise. Because a lot of people who play D&D regularly, they have a party that's like a well-oiled machine, and they're well balanced, and they go in, they know everyone knows what they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, it's like people doing raids in WoW or whatever. Like they're so practiced at it.
Honestly, I was thinking the same thing. Where like earlier we were talking about it, about this question of encounters and how you go about them, and I'm like, it's like when you're playing an MMO.
Yeah.
And at first, everything is really, really hard. And we've talked about, like, people talk about this all the time, like when you're fighting rats and they can kill you at first level. And
Right,
it's really weird.
EverQuest, I was just going to bring that up.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but-
you die when the rat kills you.
But eventually, like once you get to the mid game of an MMO, like before you're doing end game raids, where once again everything is deadly, just because it's like you said before about your 5e game, is that everything's so overpowered that when you get to that middle zone, you just slash through everything. If you if you pay your character halfway decently, you're like there, like you're the farmer with the thresher machine, just churning through monsters.
Yeah.
So the way to keep your players engaged, rather than having like something that feels super deadly every session, would be like to raise the stakes in other ways. And whether that's through like collateral damage or just like interesting
Time
story
limit.
points, time limits, stuff like
Or
that.
A hostage.
Yeah, somebody else who's
Something
in
that
danger
can
they're
stop.
trying to save.
Right.
That, yeah, so those are all great ways to kind of ratchet up that tension.
Less monsters, more traps.
Yeah. Now, I wonder if we're answering this question.
Yeah. Okay.
Because he's asking specifically about
What sort of things make encounters seem more dangerous?
yes,
I
and,
think-
and is the perception, because he says his players did feel like
Yeah.
Yeah,
No.
but that's the thing, is the perception was there, the reality wasn't. So he successfully like had enough flavor around
Yeah.
it
right.
that they weren't sure. Also, the difference between like what having a group that knows the monster manual inside out versus having a bunch of people who haven't really read it makes a big difference in perceived. They don't know how many hit points the guy has.
Right.
Like
Right.
they
Yeah.
don't know what
Right.
other abilities they're about to throw out. So as a player, that's like a lot more like, oh my god, we're about to die.
Yeah.
I just used like, 2 out of my 7 spells. Versus like, oh, I know that my one swing took out half that dude's hit points.
Yeah. Ed from Minnesota in the chat room had
very
a
good
good
point.
suggestion. The damage interpretation, or make sure you're describing things. Like I'm going to kind of paraphrase what he said, but he's noticed that when I describe damage, it makes the players react more seriously. Instead of saying you take 8 hit points, you say you dodge aside a blow that would have opened your arm. You lose 8 points instead of taking that deadly blow, and things like that. So you like ratcheting up the drama with how you're describing and how you're kind of weaving the vision of what's happening can really help too. It's a great suggestion. Thank you.
Thanks, Ed from Minnesota.
Yeah.
To be
Minnesota.
Yeah.
To be fair. Someone typed "to be fair" in the chat room, and everyone's typing "to be fair."
To be fair.
But yeah, Ben, if your players are already sweating it and you're thinking that it
Yeah.
should be easy, then it sounds like you're doing a
I don't
really
think it's
good job.
broken. I don't know why
Yeah.
you're trying to fix
Maybe
it.
you should write in and tell us what you're doing so we can
Yeah.
share your wisdom
There you
with
go.
other people.
That's it.
Maybe- yes. All right. That's it. Where's my thing? Anything else? Any other things? Anything we need to mention?
We should mention that we are doing our next Rainbow Railroad charity drive coming up in January.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that's coming up. We're going to start really like pushing that out. We're getting lots of prizes in. We're going to organize it. That's going to be happening January. It's a 24-hour stream. It's January 24th and 25th. So we start on Friday night with the Friday show. Go straight on through until the next day, Saturday night.
It's a
Yep.
bunch of games at 4-hour slots, right?
Good.
4 or
Yeah.
5-hour slots.
Got to dust off my tuxedo.
Yep, it'll be great. So get ready for that. Yeah, it's very exciting. Be aware.
Oh, and you want to mention that we're going to be one of the prizes will be Orcon.
Oh, yes.
Slots?
Well, one of the things that we're going to do, we realize a lot of you are far away and we love you, but you probably can't make it to California. But we're going to have a lot of different prizes, but one of the prizes will be slots in the games at Strategicon
That we stream.
Orcon that we stream. So you'll be able to do that, and it'll be very exciting. So
Yeah, so if
Yay.
you want to come play with us,
Yeah.
you know.
It's in February. February 14th, 15th, 16th, and 17th at the Hilton LAX.
LAX.
Also, stay tuned. There's a bunch of new games coming down the pike from
Yeah.
all of us. Our vampire game will be starting up soon. We already had session 0 for that, but there's other new games going. So stay tuned to see what we have up our
Yes.
sleeve. Kimmy's
Yeah.
been busy
Yes.
organizing.
happyjacks.org/shows, all the shows.
Yep.
Yay!
I can't play it. I can't play it. Excuse me.
Kazoo.
Sorry.
Oh my
Sorry,
God, Canada hates
Please
us.
don't give me a 1-star review because I accidentally burped. For fuck's sake. Thank you for joining us for season 25, episode 18 of Happy Jacks RPG Podcast. My name is Stu.
My name is Kimmy.
I'm Pooja.
I'm Stu's dog.
And we'll leave you with a song.
Show won't start on time, the wait won't be in vain. For the host will drink and yammer on till no emails remain. Oh, Happy Jacks, our patron saint of the skillful game master. Oh, guide us well with yes ending to avert a disaster. Whether fate or GURPS or millions of apocalyptic acts, fellow listeners and every host will always have our backs. Unless you're playing D&D and then they'll give you crap.
Twas down by Killarney's green woods that we strayed. The